This is Parish President Mike Cooper. St. Tammany Parish is home to an abundance of resources. Whether it's career opportunities, financial assistance, mental health services, caring nonprofits, and so much more, we want to bring those resources to you. This is Community Connect.
Welcome back to Community Connect. I'm Michael Vincento, the Director of Public Information for St. Tammany Parish Government. And today we have two very special guests joining us here on this show of Community Connect. We have Clint Orey, who is the Emergency Operations Manager for St. Tammany Parish Government, and Ms. Lauren Nash, who's with the National Weather Service. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
I want to jump right into it. We're in the midst of hurricane season. Question for both of you guys. What's going on right now? What are the preparations and how are we getting ready? Obviously, we don't want a storm. We're hopeful that storms won't come here, but you have to be prepared. So Clint, we'll start with you. How are we getting ready?
So, the first thing that I would want people to think about is the importance of understanding the risk, right? And we're a coastal parish here in St. Tammany Parish, and our biggest risk is natural disasters, weather, extreme weather, and particularly tropical cyclones, hurricanes. And so that is our biggest risk, and most people here are aware of that. But recognizing that there is a risk and that preparing for that risk is what what we're asking you to do, and that means having a plan, know what you're going to do in the event of a hurricane, and be prepared for potentially evacuations, or if you shelter in place, having the supplies that you need, and just having a plan of what you're going to do to account for family members, loved ones, pets, and yourself.
Lauren, I know the National Weather Service is a year-round operation, but I'm sure you guys kick it into gear during hurricane season. So what goes on at your offices during this time?
Yeah, we just kind of watch and wait, see if something happens. We're in the same boat as a lot of other people. We don't want any tropical systems, but we're coming up into peak hurricane season. We're a very vulnerable state when it comes to hurricanes and tropical systems. So we're always looking at the data. We're always looking at updates from the National Hurricane Center just to see what's going on and what to prepare for. And I think that's what people should do too. Make sure you follow, the government, follow the National Weather Service, follow your local media, and kind of just always keep an eye on if something could be spinning up. We don't want anything to catch anybody off guard.
Our message here in the Public Information Office has always been to do things now so you don't have to stress about it and worry about it when storms come out. Check your generators, maybe grab an extra few cases of water or canned goods or whatever. What would be the other advice that you would tell citizens that they should do now, Clint?
So I always encourage people to go to the website www.ready.gov, and they have a whole section on preparedness, and you can actually create a plan on their site. You just fill in the information. It's going to guide you. It gives you kind of like an overview to help you prepare, and it tells you what you should include in that and all the things you should consider. And so I would encourage people to go there and just look at it and see, like, how prepared am I? And maybe even use that tool. You can print it out if you want paper, or you can save it electronically if you want an electronic copy, and just go over that. Take the few minutes it takes to create the plan, and then go over it with your family members, those that you would be responsible for, and that you would want to be included in that, so that everyone knows what to do. What you just said, in an emergency, if you know what you're going to do ahead of time, it makes the process much less stressful, and you're going to make better decisions because you're doing it when you're not under duress. And so, while there's not a hurricane in the Gulf, now's the time to do that. So that's the message. We just want people to be prepared, and the best way to do that is to go to a source like ready.gov.
Mm-hmm. Lauren, I would imagine it's a similar message.
Yeah, we don't want anybody to be surprised. We don't want anybody panicking. And I think a lot of people don't want to take the time to go do that, but it doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of materials, doesn't take a lot of effort to just sit down and say, where are we going to go? What family members? What are we going to do with our pets? Do we have extra medication? Do we have some non-perishable food? Can openers, flashlights, just some of these basic things that you can even collect a little bit over time. We're a little late now in hurricane season, but when we're out of hurricane season, you can take more time to do that. But prepare now. Don't wait to the last minute.
You just made me think of something it's just true, and it's true for everybody. All of us have our own day-to-day emergencies that we're dealing with. It's just part of life. We live in a very busy time where we have many things to be focused on, and so it's hard maybe it's not even that we don't want to, we just feel like we don't have the time to do it. But like you said, if you just take that a little bit of time to prepare now, it will make it so much better. And I appreciate what you said about, the emergency kit. At ready.gov, it actually lists things that you should consider to have in your emergency kit, and so that's part of it. And having an emergency kit for your pets, and of course, if there's anybody with special needs or special medications, having that. And the other thing is all your important papers, so copies of birth certificates, shot records, your pets' records, prescriptions, and of course your insurance policies. And then knowing like where you would go if you needed to evacuate. Hopefully you don't have to, but if that was the case and it was the safest thing to do, and oftentimes if we're in the cone of a hurricane, where we're at, that is going to be the safest thing to do, that you know where it is you're going to go, depending on the path of the storm. And so all of that, knowing it ahead of time, and maybe even having a little bit of money saved up if that's possible. We're in tough times right now, but if that's possible, that all of those things will help make the emergency, or what I like to say, the emergencies within the emergencies, less, and make it less stressful.
So, Clint, something you just touched on was information. In times of crises, accurate information and timely information is never more important. So, Lauren, I wanted to ask you to walk us through what you guys do at the National Weather Service. And everybody gets on social media and they'll see the spaghetti models, and of course, they'll think one comes to Southeast Louisiana and that's it. So, walk us through that process. And just because a spaghetti model says it's going to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Yeah, between the spaghetti models and just social media, people posting these models, those are just computer renditions. They're, the computer taking some equations and some observations and saying this could happen in 14 days. No human intervention. And also it's only one model, one track. When we get to a point where we have a storm that's looking likely, within 7 days, we're looking at way more than just that one model. We're looking at hundreds of models that come together. So we forecast within 7 days. We don't go any farther than 7 days, and that's just the limit of our predictability. So if you see these images that go out farther than that, there's a very high error amount in that. I always like to say, if you see a model image with a storm hitting Louisiana, it could hit Maine. Like there's that much of a spread once you get past 7 days. But the thing is, people want more time. They see this and it's 10, 15 days out. I need 10 to 15 days. But the state of the science, we need to focus on those 7 days. So anything out 7 days, I just always be ready, have your kit. And then as we get in there, then you're going to start to see the cone graphics. You're going to start to see, the areas on the Hurricane Center map kind of light up. And that's when we'll start pushing out more communication, usually on social media to our partners. Your local media will start to talk about it. So we just really want people to be patient if we're out 7 days, just have your kit. And then once we get in that week, that's all the time you're going to get. We saw with Ida, sometimes you get less time, and we can't control the storms, unfortunately. So always be prepared, always be watching. You don't want to go to bed one night and think the storm's hitting Florida and never look at the TV again, and 4 days later it's hitting Louisiana. So just keep an eye every day, twice a day when we start to get into hurricane season to see if anything's forming.
Clint, as emergency operations manager, there's so many components that goes into your job, whether it's evacuations and all these things. So walk me through, lately, as the last few years, we've seen like 72 hours, and these storms have turned from tropical to strong storms. So how does that impact your position?
So as Lauren was saying, and we rely on the National Weather Service, that is where we're getting and the National Hurricane Center, that is where we're getting our information to make a decision on whether we should, do evacuations, whether they be voluntary or mandatory. And just so everybody understands, in the law, those terms are in state law. It's part of the Louisiana Disaster Act. And a voluntary evacuation means that we're feeling like there's a chance we might have to call a mandatory evacuation. We're saying, hey, it's a good idea based on what we can see and know right now, based on the information that we have, start now, consider it, evacuating. When we get to a mandatory evacuation, it doesn't mean that somebody's going to come pull you out of your home. It just means you have the right to stay in your home, but it just means that all the services that you normally would get are going to be shut down. You're not going to get those. And it's just a dangerous situation. And, we would hate to see somebody, who, chose to stay and couldn't get the help they needed and either lost their life or suffered or saw a loved one suffer when they could have just evacuated and come back And we try not to overuse that for that reason. That's one of the challenges that when you see those models that show, hey, a hurricane's coming at us, 10 days, 11 days out, and then nothing happens, it starts to desensitize people to that. And there's a difference between that and what the National Weather Service is putting out or what we're saying. And so in that 72-hour time frame is when we will start having to make those decisions as a parish. It's ultimately the parish president's decision. But it's based on all the best science, all the best information we can get from the National Weather Service and National Hurricane Center. And really, it's after the 72-hour time frame, and Lauren could talk about that. There's some products we get on predicted wind, predicted storm surge, and those things are really what are going to make the decision on evacuation. So that could come even after the 72 hours, and that's if we have that amount of time to know. If it's a storm that just pops up in the Gulf, we could have less time than that. Mm-hmm. And so what she mentioned about paying attention to the weather, and it's a good segue into the importance of having some sort of alerting, whether it's sign up for St. Tammany Stat or FEMA's app that can alert you to weather. The National Weather Service has an app. Any of those that will give you those weather alerts timely, and you can adjust what you want to get and how often and the timing of it. But those are all good things to have just to help you stay aware, of the risk.
Something here in St. Tammany Parish, we don't often see evacuations just because of location and the various different things, and also the timing of the storm. That plays a major component. We're seeing less and less time, and you hear from the state police that they need 3 days notice to really call for evacuation.
Yeah, for contraflow.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. And so if contraflow was to be enacted, all those areas that are south of us, even more vulnerable than we are, we're kind of like the last line of defense. And you always hear people say, north of I-10, I-12, and that is kind of true, but not really. If you're along the Pearl River, the Tchefuncte River, any of the rivers, you are susceptible to storm surge. I personally live north of I-12 and know that a Cat 3 storm could flood my home with storm surge if it took just the right path. And so that alone is not the deciding factor. And you could live in a place, and I've heard that from a lot of people. Oh, we've lived here. My family's lived here for 2 or 3 generations. It's never flooded from storm surge, but it's just because the right storm and the right path hasn't happened. Every place in St. Tammany Parish can flood for the most part, particularly south of I-12, I-10. And so, we just ask people to please trust that, and we try not to be alarmist, but to be realist and based on the science and based on forecast. Hey, this is what it looks like could happen, and then it's up to you to make the best decision you can for your family. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, a lot of good points there. I think one of the things I want to pull out of that is what you said about living somewhere for so many generations. There is no 2 storms that are the same.
Right.
Never in the history of weather will 2 storms be the same. So we hear a lot of, I survived Camille, I survived X, I survived Y. And even just a bowling ball on a GFS model that you see, we don't know if that's surge, if that's flooding rain, if that's tornadoes. People don't know this, but the number 1 killer in tropical systems is freshwater flooding. So, bringing up the river as well.
Right.
So there's so many things that go into these systems that if you just rely on one thing or one category or one past event, you could potentially miss a very serious situation for yourself.
Yeah, you said something to me one time about about getting on an airplane. If in normal conditions, I think it's like a 1 in 11 million chance that a plane will crash. But if we told you today, there's like a 1 in 10 chance.
Would you get on the plane?
Would you get on the plane? And it's like, yeah, that's a good point. Like, I'll wait and fly another day. And so that's really kind of what we're talking about here when you consider the importance of evacuating. A lot of people have installed generators and feel comfortable, like, well, I'll be okay if I stay here. And that's true as long as your home's not damaged, as long as the fuel source isn't damaged. Even natural gas, and I remember in Katrina, a lot of natural gas lines got ripped out of the ground by fallen trees. And so what you plan for may not happen. And so those things are great to have. And if you're able to come back, maybe you're able to come back sooner if you've got those types of resources. But man, if you have the ability to, I would always recommend people to evacuate. Just get away, let the storm pass, and then come back. It's just safer. And so if we're in the cone of it, but
Let's talk, let's say a storm comes through, like Ida, one we've had in recent years. What are some of the things people should be doing if they stay? If they're here in St. Tammany Parish, what's the next steps for them? What would you tell the citizens?
So if you do stay, obviously, hopefully you're prepared. You've got water, you've got batteries and flashlights and a radio so that you can still continue to get information, because that's really important. Follow the directions of your local government officials and your first responders. They have information, and it's not that we're not giving you all the information. It's hard to disseminate every bit of information that there is all at one time. And a lot of times, even when it's pushed out, not everyone's getting it at the same time or from the same source. And so we just encourage people to, to stay home if they, post-storm. Obviously, check on your neighbors, check your home. Hopefully, you've got communication, but if you don't, if you can leave at that point, especially if there's damage to your home, that's advisable. Shut off your utilities until power is restored, so that way you're not getting those surges. A lot of times when they're trying to restore electricity, there's surges that happen that can be dangerous and can cause fires. We get a lot of fires post-storm. And so that, again, it goes back to the importance of if it's going to be a major storm, consider leaving and wait till it's safe to come back. But being self-sufficient and knowing that you've got what you need, because it may be some time before stores open back up, and whether or not pods, which are those pointed distributions where tarps are given out and water's given out and food's given out, whether we can open those or not depends upon whether the state's going to release those resources and where the need is. So during Ida, there were so many requests and they can do about 10 or 12 a day. I want to say there was like 80 requests around that number for pods immediately. And so if you were towards the end of that, it might be 8 days before that's open, and obviously stores would be open back up. And so relying upon that, there's only so many resources, only so much that can be done. Our National Guard are amazing. They do a great job. All of our first responders, our fire, police, EMS do a great job. But all of that's limited, right? And so the need will be great. Again, that's why evacuating usually is your best course of action. If you stay, be self-sufficient. Also understand that even if you have a generator, if you're on a municipal sewer system, oftentimes there's going to be challenges there because until they get power back to that sewer lift station, there's no place for it to go. The pumps, the grinders, all those things they need to process the sewage isn't working, and we can get backups. And so I know that our municipalities and our water companies have worked diligently to try and get the resources to put generators and stuff like that, but it's just very expensive. There's so many of them, it's not a guarantee. And so that's another thing to consider if you stay. And there could be some challenges with sewage and certainly with clean water. So all those things need to be taken into account for in your plans if you choose to stay.
Lauren, I want to talk about the meteorologists and their role after storms. Mm-hmm. You spend so much time preparing and getting through the storm. What are you guys doing after the storm? Obviously, it could be hot. There's so many things that are impacting the citizens. So walk us through your shoes after a storm.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of the last couple storms, Ida, Laura, we've had heat issues. So we're still pushing out heat advisories or heat products. Also, we're really just trying to amplify the message, right? So if the parishes are pushing stuff out, if the states are pushing stuff out, any way that we can get information to people after the storm, the better. And of course, weather doesn't stop. I mean, God forbid we have a tornado outbreak 3 days after a hurricane. We, still need to issue our products and still need to help people out as much as we can. So our job keeps going, keep watching the weather, and I hope that after the storm, people have ways to get their warnings, whether it's radio, because you don't know if there's going to have cell phone service. We don't know if we're going to have TV or power or anything. So weather keeps going.
We've talked about resources during storms, about the ready.gov, getting a game plan. What are some of the things that you think people don't know about that they should know about, or you would like them to know about in preparing for storms and getting through and then the aftermath of a storm? What are some of those resources?
Well, so like I said, the one that I always push people to is because it's so comprehensive is ready.gov. It literally covers any topic, not just hurricanes, but wildfires and tornadoes and floods and even hazardous materials releases, any type of situation. It covers it gives you some basic information just to kind of understand what to expect and things to consider. But certainly having ways to receive information, paying attention to that, and social media can be good for that if you're going to a good source. And so whether it's the National Weather Service, whether it's one of your first responders or parish government or your city government, you're going to usually get good information from those sources. They're going to vet it before it goes out. And so having that good source that you know you can count on, but it's if those things are working. And so that's important to remember. And then after the storm, there's good resources like through the American Red Cross, United Way, many of your faith-based organizations. There's a group called Crisis Cleanup that you can sign up to get help with debris removal and gutting houses and that sort of thing. They do a really good job. And so there are resources out there, and I think we'll just focus on trying to get those put to our website, the parish's website, to share those for people. But I would always say the best place to start is ready.gov for preparedness and understanding what to do.
Yeah. And I think something that we amplify that you just said as well is you may have everything, right? You might have a bunker, you might have natural gas or solar, but it is terrifying to live through a hurricane. And as someone who's been in a couple EOCs during really major hurricanes, you don't want to hear phone calls from people that are, hiding their children under a sink because their roof is ripping off. You may have everything ready to go. You may have a perfect plan. You may think you can survive on your own, but do you want to? Do you want to go through that? Something I think about a lot.
No, and what you just said, I was a first responder for 32 years before I took this position, and that has happened many, many times, and that is gut-wrenching. And we've put first responders' lives in jeopardy, and we did during Ida for people that stayed as a roof blew off of an apartment complex that they responded to, and a house with a tree through it with people trapped. And while those first responders were out there when they shouldn't be, and trees falling all around them, it's just not worth it. If you can go. That is a very, very good point.
In conclusion, your final thoughts, anything you'd like to share with the citizens, a final message, and maybe perhaps about how we're getting prepared or going forward, what the plan is?
Well, just as Lauren said, you knowing the risk and doing everything you can to be prepared for it, that is the right thing to do. Having a plan is the right thing to do. But once we make our choices, what's going to happen is going to happen, and we're going to have to deal with it. And from a government standpoint, we do the best that we can to take care of our citizens. We want them to stay safe. We know that, particularly in a hurricane, the best thing to do is for people to evacuate. That is always going to be the safest thing to do. Get out before the weather gets bad, and as soon as we can, we'll let you know when it's safe to come back. And if you sign up for STAT, St. Tammany's new alerting system, those types of messages, if we know there's an area that's opening back up and power's coming back on and stores are opening, we put into place in our EOC, something that we created that's new is a business and industry function in there. We're using Tammany Corp that has a massive outreach with all of our businesses to try and be able to push that information out as those businesses are opening back up, so you'll know, are there gas stations, are there drugstores, are there grocery stores, and we already do try to identify when power is coming back on. As that's happening, we'll notify our citizens and they'll know, hey, I can come back to my area. That seems to be a big reason why a lot of times people won't leave, because they're not sure. I won't know when it's okay for me to come back. And so that's one of the goals that I have, is that we'll use our alerting system, those that sign up for it, to push that kind of information out. And certainly through social media, we'll do that as well. Just I hope that people will consider taking the safest approach that they can. You can replace any property and money can be earned and you can do all those things, but you can't, if somebody's hurt or heaven forbid if somebody's killed, you can't undo that. And so that's really the main message. We just want our citizens to be safe.
Okay. Lauren, your final thoughts?
Yeah, one final thought I have is, don't pay attention to what people say about the seasonal forecast. A storm can always hit Louisiana. It doesn't matter if it's El Nino, La Nina, it doesn't matter if it's May or October. it sounds kind of weird to sit here and say always be aware, but we live in an area where we have to be. So just know that regardless of what's going on with the seasonal forecast, always be ready. And the other thing is what I said earlier is to follow legitimate sources of information, right? Anybody can make a Facebook page. I can go on right now and I can make a Facebook page called Official Weather Information, and it's probably not official weather information. So, National Weather Service, your local government, your local media stations, some of the national media stations, but there's a lot of Facebook pages out there that are running around posting model images, trying to do Facebook Lives. Just because you don't see something on the National Weather Service page doesn't mean it's not happening. We're not going to overhype it. We're going to tell you what you need to hear and when you need to hear it. So focus on the official information, stay calm, and know what you're going to do if a storm comes.
Speaking of information, and you referenced it, Clint, President Cooper did just revitalize our alert system. It's STAT, St. Tammany Alert Telecommunications. And for any citizens who want to sign up, you could visit the Everbridge app, or you could visit stpgov.org/stat. So that's information. It's great for our citizens, and it's boil water advisories to tornado watches, heat advisories, so everything you would need to be alerted by, it's in that software. So I just want to thank both of you coming today and sharing this important information.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for letting us do that.
All right, that's all the time we have for this edition of Community Connect. We'll see you next time.